So let's continue with the SQL Server and Visual Studio tutorial. In this part we will get data from the database. So here is the database that we created. It's a simple database with one table called sensor. It has three columns, sensor ID, sensor name and sensor type. And we have been inserting some data into that specific table. So if I run a select statement, select all from sensor, we are able to retrieve the following data that are stored in this table. So we have sensor ID, sensor name and sensor type. So let's start to see if we are able to retrieve or read some data from the database and present it in a Visual Studio Windows Forms desktop application. So here is the application that we are going to create. It consists of two text boxes. We begin with a select statement like this: select sensor name, sensor type from sensor where sensor ID equals to 1. So basically we will only get this first record where sensor ID equals to 1, and then we have sensor name 1 and temperature. So when we click here on this read button, then we need to create the code for retrieving and presenting the values from the database in these two text boxes. So we will create a basic Windows Forms application. So then basically we just select the Windows Forms app template in Visual Studio, and then we have created the project. We need to install a NuGet package called Microsoft.data.SQL client. This package makes sure that we are able to communicate with the SQL Server and are able to retrieve or insert data, etc. into the database. Then we need to specify a proper connection string so we are able to communicate with the database. So here you see some examples. The connection string can be written in different ways. Two main options: either use Windows authentication, then this current Windows account is used in order to log on to your database, while the other option is SQL Server authentication. Then you use the one of the users that are part of the SQL Server. If you remember, when installing the SQL Server, I advised you to choose mixed mode, and during that you needed to enter a proper password for the default SA user. SA is used for short for system administrator, and during the setup or installation you needed to specify a password for that user, which you can use here if you choose to use this SQL Server authentication in your connection string. So let's just create this application or project in Visual Studio. So I just select create new project, get a list of templates, then I just can search for Windows Forms, and then this Windows Forms app is popping up. Select this one. I just choose a proper location on my hard drive and a proper name for my application. It could be whatever you like. I can just call it sensor app or something like this. Click next. I choose to use this default latest framework. Click create, and the project will be created for us. So then we have a blank Windows Forms desktop application. Here you can create the graphical user interface. Here you have the different objects that you can just drag in to create your user interface. Here you have the Solution Explorer, and here you have the different properties. So, but let's start to include this or install this NuGet package. So just right click here, manage NuGet packages, and go to browse and search for this package called Microsoft.data.SQL client. So I just click here, install, and click apply and accept. And when it's installed, it will be located here under dependencies, packages, and here you see we have installed these packages. Now we are ready to start communicating with the database and perform insert or updates, etc. So we can either insert data or retrieve data from the database. But in this part of the tutorial, we are going to basically retrieve data from the database. So the first we need to do now is to create two text boxes. Then here I just search for a text box. Here, one here, I can make it a little bit bigger, like this, and another one. I can also add some labels. So this would be this sensor name that are stored in the database. And this will be the sensor type. Just change the name here in the property windows. Sensor type, like this. And that will be the sensor name. Basically, that's the graphical user interface. I can also change the name for the text boxes. So the default name is just textbox1. I can change it to txt sensor name, like this. Txt this, and the same for this one. Txt sensor type or something like this. In addition, we need a button. So here you find the button. Check a bit here. I can just make this smaller to fit the contents. And then I can change the name for this one. So now when I click this button, we should read information from the database. So then I can just call the button read or something. Now we can change the name for it. Instead of button 1, I just change it to read, like this. So that's the graphical user interface we are going to use. So now we need to start creating the C# code for retrieving data in these two text boxes. So basically now we can run the application, but of course we haven't created any code yet. So here is just two empty text boxes, and I click here, nothing happened because we haven't created the code. But now when I click this button, we should create a code to display a sensor name here and a sensor type here. So then basically I just need to double click on this button in order to create an event handler for this button. So then let's start by creating the code inside here. Then later we will improve the code step by step. Typically then we just need to start creating a connection string. Like this. So IntelliSense suggests on here, so we can use that one as a starting point. And then of course we need to change it. So then connection string data source is the name of our computer and the database. So then I can go to the SQL Server Management Studio, and that's the name we need to enter. So then I can just right click, select properties, and just copy that one and use that one inside here. Initial catalog is the name of the database, so we have called the database for sensor system. Like this. That's the connection string. Maybe we need to improve it, but let's start with that one. And also instead of data source, we can also use server, and also instead of initial catalog, we can also use database, like this. So that's more intuitive name to use, I think. So database, here represent the name of the database, and server, here is the server name. Integrated security means equals to true, means that we are going to use Windows authentication. Next, we need to figure out what we want to retrieve from the database. So something like this. So string query, we can call it SQL query. That's just the name of the variable. You can call it whatever you like. SQL query, I prefer to call it. And then we need to have a select statement here, but then you can go to the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio and create a select statement here, and then we can just copy it into our code later. But it's good practice to test it here to make sure it works as expected. So then sensor, we want to have here is the table, and here we see the different columns. So we want to show the sensor name and the sensor type in these two text boxes from sensor. And we only want to show, if I now click execute, we get a list of all the sensors. But since it's just two text boxes, I want to show this one in the first text box and that one in the other text box. So then I can just create a where statement there. And we add a where statement, so then where. And then we have this sensor ID, so where sensor ID equals to 1, like this. And we click execute, and that's basically what we should present in these two text boxes: the sensor name, sensor 1, and the sensor type, temperature, for this specific sensor ID here. Basically, then I can just copy that SQL query into the code here, like this. And the next we need to create here now is SQL connection. So then I just start by typing SQL connection like this. So then SQL connection equals to connection. I can just call the variable con or connection, new SQL connection, and then the input is the connection string that we have created here. Then we need to open that connection. So then con open like this. Then we need to specify SQL command like this. So SQL command equals to new SQL command, and then SQL query that we specify here, and the connection. Then next we need to specify an SQL data reader like this. So then SQL data reader, then just use the variable dr or something, short for data reader, equals to command dot execute a reader. So now we are ready to start retrieving data. Then we use dr dot read inside typically an if else statement. So then dr dot read like this. And then here you see the IntelliSense create the code more or less for us. So then if dr read, this means that if there are some data into this table or this query returns some data, then we can put the sensor name into this text box called txt sensor name, and this sensor type into this other text box like this. And then finally we can just also, good practice to close this connection like this. So that should be the entire code. Yeah, of course this close is a method, so it has to be like this. And here, if missing some parentheses here like this. So now, and of course a semicolon here. So now I think the code should be without any errors. So then basically you can just run the application. And now when you click on this button, hopefully the sensor name should be presented here and the sensor type here. And that is the data that we are retrieving from the database. Okay, there's some error here. Here it's complaining about the connection to the database is successfully established, while the certificate is not trusted. So basically, typically, we need to just add here in the connection string on the end here. We could say that we need to trust this certificate, so then we just add trust server certificate equals to true, like this. So that's the entire connection string. The server name, the name of the database, integrated security means that we are using Windows authentication. And then finally this trusted certificate equals to true, meaning that we are trusting the server and the certificate. So then let's try once more. Just click save and run the application. And now hopefully when we click on this button, you see here we get this sensor 1 and the temperature, which is the same as we get here in SQL Server Management Studio by running this query. Then we get the first item that are stored in this table, this sensor table, like this.